Hello and welcome to India's World. Britain's Prime Minister Theresa May has finally laid out her plans for Brexit, nearly 7 months after the UK voted to leave the European Union or EU. Key aspects of her plan include UK leaving the EU's single market and giving the British Parliament a final vote on the deal. The UK would also not be a full member of the customs union, but instead negotiate some kind of a tariff-free trade deal. It would also continue to cooperate with the EU on areas like crime and anti-terrorism. Prime Minister Theresa May also threatened that if the EU failed to offer a good deal, then the UK would move to become a low-tax regime to attract investment. Once it is out of the EU, Britain would no longer abide by the EU's immigration rules or be subject to the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. To discuss what Theresa May's hard Brexit might entail and how easy or difficult it might be for the UK to get a good deal from the EU, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Dinkar Khullar. He was India's ambassador to Belgium, Luxembourg and the European Union. He was also ambassador to Azerbaijan, Austria and permanent representative of India to UN offices and international organizations in Vienna. We have with us Ambassador Shiv Shankar Mukherjee. He was India's ambassador to Nepal, Egypt and High Commissioner to Nigeria and the UK. Professor Manoj Pant is professor at the Center for Trade and Development at the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. I welcome you gentlemen to this discussion. Ambassador Khullar, let me begin with you. The British Prime Minister has ruled out a partial pullout or a half in, half out relationship with the European Union. She favors a clean break, obviously. Now, how clean or how hard would Brexit be? And had she opted for a soft Brexit, would that have dishonored the mandate of the Leave campaign?
Clearly, it would have. I think the mandate was out, and which meant what she has said, that out of the single market, don't accept the common tariff that the EU has. Most importantly, she is limited movement because the primary basis of the European Union is free movement of goods and services, capital and labor. And she's closed the labor option altogether by saying that there will be controls on movement of people. But I think this is a reflection of the mandate. The problem is going to be how hard Brexit is going to be on the UK itself. But politically, the call, I don't think she had much choice. She had to do what the mandate was. And I don't think even if it goes back to Parliament, as you mentioned in your introductory remarks, if it goes back to Parliament, Parliament does not have, I think, the authority to overrule the referendum.
That's what her government says. But Ambassador Shiv Shankar Mukherjee, was a flood of cheap labor from Eastern Europe a boon to British businesses because it depressed wages, and it helped the economy because businesses were making profit based on that wage rate. So was it good or bad decision? Was it purely an emotional thing that you don't like foreigners coming in and you don't want to see them, period?
Well, exactly as in Trump's victory in the United States, this was the immigration thing was, I think, the fundamental reason for Brexit, for the way people voted. It was a vote where populism won over cold statistics and logical messages about the gains that Britain has made out of being a member of the European Union. You're absolutely right. The immigrants that were in the UK and the immigrants that are there in the US, for that matter, have actually contributed, if you look at the cold facts, more to the economy than taken out of it. But the message that these are immigrants, these are outsiders, they're taking your jobs, with the subtext of jobs and terrorism, the combined with the influx of refugees from the mess in the Middle East, was a populist message that won. So there's no doubt that the message was factually perhaps wrong. In fact, all the messages that were rolled out to support the Brexit vote by their protagonists about how much money Britain pays to the European Union every week and so on, how many British laws have been subverted by the European Court of Justice, were all demonstrably wrong. But as I said, the populist message at a time of economic downturn and so on is very difficult to win over. And as far as this hard Brexit is concerned, just one line, Look, I think Theresa May is making the best of a bad job, or if you can put it that way, making a virtue out of necessity. Hard Brexit, there was no alternative. It's not just the mandate. The reactions over a period of months from the European Union, from government as well as outside government, has been that, look, Britain, you have voted to go out, you will go out, you will not do any cherry picking. In fact, the reaction to her speech from the person handling the Brexit file in the European Parliament was precisely that. So what she said in her policy speech is basically what she has to do, what she knows she has to do, and doesn't have much choice.
Okay. Professor Pant, how messy is this divorce going to be? For example, once Britain is no longer a part of the single market, how would it go about ensuring what Mrs. May calls a new, comprehensive, bold and ambitious free trade agreement? You already had one. You got out of it. And now you're saying we'll replace it with something more comprehensive? Actually, how can it be more comprehensive once you get out of a comprehensive agreement?
Well, see, as Ambassador Shiv Shankar and also Dinkar has said, it's true. The hard Brexit was a combination of someone to blame for recession in the country, and the Europeans saying, okay, if you think we are at fault, then make a clean break. So it was, Mia Bibi Raji to kya karega Kazi. I mean, everyone was willing that let's have it full break. Now, as far as the messy part, you see, what she's saying is, I think, an important thing, that maybe UK wants to keep the immigrants out, which is really why all this happened. But is that going to compensate for the loss to the UK? Because on the bottom line is, many businesses have moved into UK using that as a foothold to get in the EU. UK is a very small market. So what happens to that? And, and I think the economic issues are becoming very important. I'll give you a small example. Roughly about UK trade evenly divided between trade with UK, with EU and trade with the rest of the world. Now, EU is in any case slowing down. So there's nothing much to get from EU itself. They are in any case a deficit country as far as EU is concerned. UK has a trade deficit for a long time. But look at the worrying thing. In the last 1 year, what I could make out, their current account deficit has dropped by about 5.6% GDP, which is quite phenomenal in a year or so. And the cause is because of their decline income from abroad. Now, that's the problem. UK, apart from few commodities which will not be affected, is largely a service exporter to EU. And service exports means, where does the parent company locate? Let's take our own homegrown Infosys. They are located in London, right? Now that was good enough as long as you guys could move.
Yeah.
Now it's effectively like a H-1B visa ban imposed by EU. So what do? That's going to be the bigger problem.
All right. Would there be a divorce bill that Britain might have to pay? Because there are some long-term EU bills which are estimated to be as high as £50 billion that the UK owes or needs to pay the EU. Do you think that Theresa May might offer them a one-off payment in the hope that this might give her a better deal?
I don't think so. I think Theresa May would be unwise to do that, because knowing the EU negotiators as I do, there'll be a hard line on that. Those bills have to be settled. Remember that there are a number of other major issues that have to be settled. What are the pension payments for the employees in Brussels, British employees who will obviously lose their jobs? There are 2 EU institutions based in the UK. What happens to these? So I don't think the EU is going to play softball. The EU negotiators on these issues are going to say, you walked out because you didn't want to pay the money. I mean, apart from the immigration issue. And even countries like, I think Norway, if I'm not mistaken, or Iceland, who are outside the EU but get the benefit of European Economic Area, have to pay for it. Yeah. There's a contribution that they make to the EU for this. The Europeans want to make no contribution. They want to get into a free trade agreement, as Professor Pant Manoj has mentioned, that an agreement which any normal trade agreement with the European Union, take for instance the Canadian one, that took 8 years. The GCC one has been pending for 14 years. Yeah. They're not going to be able to negotiate trade agreement by 2019, which means they have to pay the common external tariff from 2019.
Okay, all right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're discussing what a hard Brexit might mean for the United Kingdom. Professor Pant, the British PM has ruled out full membership of the customs union, which has EU plus several other countries. And that's what enables free movement of goods across these countries in a single sort of base level tariff system. How would exiting the customs union enable Britain to do free trade deals with the EU member countries now?
See, it's like this. A customs union in any case wouldn't have made sense because the whole point of the EU was to move beyond a customs union to economic union, which in any case is out because of the immigration. That wouldn't have made sense. They would not have a halfway measure with this. Now, what exactly would UK do? You see, UK now faces the tariff, which are the normal, MFN tariffs which the EU has. It's not such a bad thing, I tell you. I don't see why she needs to worry too much about it because most EU tariffs are down to pretty low levels, except on items which affect developing countries like leather goods and garments, which is not something strong point of EU. So I don't think that worries her. I think, frankly, I believe the trade part is not what the killing part. It's the services part which is going to be. How you do that? That involves local legislation within UK, outside. Yeah. Where do your workers go? Do they come back and work? Do they get a different kind of permit to work there? That's going to be the bigger issue.
Let me stay with the customs union. Yeah. Professor Pant says that this shouldn't be a cause of worry, opting out. But clearly it is because Mrs. May has also said that Britain could be an associate member of the customs union or remain a signatory to some elements of it. Can you get out of the customs union and remain signatory to some elements of it? What do you think she meant by that?
This is playing games. There's no way. Once you're out of the single market, you're out of the single market. And as Manoj says, the common external tariff applies to you. But on services, it's a very good point. I think their main interest is in the services sector. And their main negotiating problem is going to be precisely in this sector. This is where blockages will be introduced by Brussels because you are not going to allow them free movement of labor. The moment you are not allowing free movement of their services, they'll be interested in financial services. They are worried that Frankfurt may knock out the City of London. You see, because people will relocate in Frankfurt now to deal with Europe rather than through City of London. They're worried about that. But my own experience tells me that this is not going to be an easy game. They know, Europe knows exactly what Manoj has said, that British interest is in services, not in goods.
Okay. Ambassador Mukherjee, Theresa May has also claimed that after Brexit, Britain would get control is the term she used, of the number of people coming to Britain from EU. Now, does this mean that she will stop movement of people from EU completely, or does it mean that she will introduce a work permit system allowing certain kinds of people to come into certain skills which are required and block others at the lower end of the skills spectrum?
I think the latter, which itself is a huge departure, because at the moment you have completely free movement of, the four elements that make up the European Union: goods, services, capital and people. And frankly, this entire Brexit exercise was all about people. The rest is important but detailed. The vote was based on this populist message about immigration. And yes, certainly, I think the second alternative you mentioned is what she will do. Britain, you look at the Indian experience, has never been, has been quite enthusiastic about border controls for people. Now, the worrying point is, and this is why I think she's in a cleft stick, there are 12 million people from the European Union who are working in Britain. There are 3 million Brits who are working.
3 million from EU working in Britain and 1.2 million Brits who are...
Well, I believe the figure is larger, but even if there are some millions working in Britain and a slightly smaller number of British people who are working in Europe. And if you look at the European press, as I did a cursory reading, reflecting opinion of EU governments and society at large, the mood is hard, exactly as Dinkar said. The mood is not at all in favor of making a kind of a velvet divorce possible. Okay. It will be a messy divorce.
Okay, let me take a part of this question to you, Professor Pant. So these 3 million EU citizens in the UK or 1.2 million British citizens in EU, clearly Theresa May is aware of their predicament and what will happen to them. So she has said that her government wants to guarantee the rights of EU citizens who are already in Britain and the rights of British nationals in other member states reciprocally, and says as early as we can. So does it mean she wants this arrangement to come into being before Brexit negotiations begin? And what are these rights that she wants to protect? What rights?
Obviously, because right now they don't need any rights to move freely between UK and EU. They have to get worker rights. Right now, that will the EU give special worker rights to personnel who are of companies located in UK or not, and vice versa. So it's very clear that she knows that that's where their problems are. I don't know how easy it is going to be. Will the EU make a special dispensation? There is one. For example, Switzerland, which also has a deal with the EU, allows many German workers to work in Switzerland. So I don't know how that will work. Maybe she'll use the Swiss model, but Switzerland is a small place. And Switzerland never had animosity in a breakup. This is not a friendly breakup, right? This is someone has lost the boxing match and is down on the mat. Now, who's going to get up first is going to be the issue. So I think that is the one. I don't know how well she's going to do it, but they do have.
Does it also cover pensioners? Because a lot of British pensioners have properties in France and other parts of Europe, south of Spain. What happens to them?
That's not too difficult to work out, except it'll have to come under the normal, what we call, Indians will understand is NRI rules. It will not come under the EU rules. I don't think that's so serious issue.
Okay, let me ask you this, Master Khullar. Now, with Brexit, clearly the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice will end in the UK. And at the same time, UK is entering into several agreements of various kinds with these EU countries. Now, what happens if there's a trade deal requires adjudication, or there's who will the adjudicator be?
That will have to be part of the negotiation process, because the they have left the EU. Now they are like India negotiating with the EU. In any trade agreement that you have, you will have a clause of arbitration, and that's a standard. So that will be a standard part of the clause if they can reach an agreement. I have serious worries on how this agreement is going to be worked, because just to add to a point made earlier, the movement of labor from Eastern Europe, particularly from Eastern Europe, but from all over Europe to the UK, was also a provider of services. So it is also limiting a free movement of services.
Yeah.
That's
okay, quickly.
Yeah, all of us are forgetting in this world of RTAs, there's still an institution called the WTO. So they would have to be subject to the same rules as the rest of the countries are in their dispute on trade. Now, services, there is no protocol yet in WTO. That's the one where they'll have to work out.
Since you brought up WTO, is it possible that if a Brexit deal is not worked out, Britain could leave the EU under WTO rules?
Sure.
Yeah.
WTO doesn't force you. WTO enables you to have an RTA. It doesn't say you must be up. Look at the USA. They're going to leave everything. They'll be on their own. That is not a problem.
Okay, all right. We need to take a break again at this point. We'll be back in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're discussing what hard Brexit might mean for the United Kingdom. Ambassador Khullar, the only land border that the UK will have with the EU will be Northern Ireland's border with the Irish Republic. It's apparently a 310-mile long border. And the British Prime Minister says that maintaining free movement across this border will be an important priority for the talks with the EU. Now, how will UK keep this 310-mile long border open and still prevent illegal immigration through this border and also illegal flow of goods through it? It could provide a backdoor for all kinds of goods to come into the EU without a trade deal.
I think that is not a major issue. After all, EU is supposed to be close to outsiders, amongst which are North Africans, all these refugees that are coming in. It's a small border and it can be managed. And illegal immigration is not going to stop because of Brexit. Illegal immigration will take place. Our own Indians are pretty good at this business. So I don't think that is going to be an issue. That they have to do for political reasons again, because of the whole Ireland issue that they have. The problem is going to be, after all, Gibraltar also is there, for that matter, as a border. I think that the issue is going to be, what will they do with those who are present? I think an issue you raised earlier.
Yeah.
I see them having a serious issue of shortages of labor, which is a problem the EU itself has not addressed. EU is running short of population. They need people from outside. They need people from Asia, Africa to support their economy and maintain their economy. They're not realistic. This is all populism that's going on.
Mr. Mukherjee, Mrs. May has also threatened that if the EU tries to impose a punitive deal on Britain, she might convert Britain into an offshore tax haven, and EU would lose access to crucial supply chains, to London's financial markets, the City of London, as we have discussed, and the goodwill of Britain. And she's even talked of loss of the intelligence inputs from British intelligence. Now, is this a threat, and how prudent is it to begin negotiations by threatening the other party?
Well, I see it as a part of a negotiating strategy. Most of her speech was about placating the her British constituency, that she is following the mandate. And the rest of it was threats to the European Union that please accommodate me in giving me the best of all possible worlds now that we've gone out. Otherwise, as you said, we will reduce our taxes, we will incentivize enough to draw much more investment into Britain rather than the EU. And she added a line about how it will cause incalculable harm to the European Union itself, which might split even more and more into little pieces. I think those are empty threats. European Union consists of a pretty large number of small countries, but there are heavyweights there, like Germany and France. And I don't think they'll be very much impressed by these threats, because financial centers, London is an extremely important financial center, but already there is talk from various companies about looking at options to relocate in Europe and so on. Business is not going to be swayed by patriotism or populism. Business is going to look for where it can do business. And as I said, I think I look upon this threat about using London's financial clout as a kind of bargaining chip. I don't think it's going to work.
Okay, but what happened to supply chains? For example, Airbus industry, the engines come from UK. Car parts,
the engines will have to be sold under the common external tariff. I mean, those are things that Britain will have to deal with, and the buyers in Europe will have to deal with. But the fact is that European Union is not going to save British industry just because some of the supply chains going into the European Union come from Britain. That sympathy has been lost by Britain, and there's no doubt about it. I remember seeing the Polish foreign minister on in an interview on television saying, because so many of the immigrants in Britain, in hotels and other places and so on, are Polish. The word Polish resonated during the immigration thing. And he said, well, you don't want me, so I don't want you.
Absolutely.
This tax haven is a very silly argument. I'll tell you why. No countries become great today because they're tax havens. Except for only Holland offers a small little rebate on interest. But no country does that. Secondly, no company comes to you simply because you're a tax haven. So that's the most silly. And third, there's an OECD code of conduct now established worldwide on taxation of multinationals. That's a very silly argument. Yeah.
But
it's political.
Could there be different time scales for phasing in different aspects of the new relationship? That you do X first, Y later, Z later.
These things don't work out.
You have to do everything together.
Well, these things don't work out. As just to take an Indian example, as an Indian case example, we've been setting up these RTAs, and now everyone's wondering why do we have RTAs at all? And these are across both political dispensations, the previous government and the present government. So, you can't do these things. We'll start with commodity, then it doesn't work because everyone stops wherever the interests are served. So it's much better to work out a full deal.
Okay. My last question to you. I found it very interesting that Prime Minister May also said that she wants to retain some EU labour laws after Brexit, such as 48-hour week, 20 days of paid leave, 14 weeks of maternity leave for women. Is it aimed at addressing the concerns of British working class, which voted overwhelmingly for Brexit, but wants to retain the rights that derive from EU?
Absolutely. She has also said there that many aspects of the original acquis they did with the EU will be now made into British law. That's clearly intended to cater to precisely the community which has voted for Brexit. So these laws will have to be done. Just a point on what you asked, Manoj. You can't do, once you invoke Article 50, you have to go the whole, you start negotiations on the entire range of services. You can't say that I will do commodities, I won't do services. You simply can't do it. Article 50, till they invoke Article 50, which they're going to do in March apparently, once they do that, everything is on the table. And therefore they will take, I think they will take not only these, they will take many other EU laws, they will keep in place, they will put them into British law.
And how long do you think, Ambassador Mukherjee, will the transitional period be once Article 50 is invoked in March?
According to the European Union guidelines, these negotiations are supposed to take 2 years. If there is one thing certain in today's uncertain world, it is that it is going to take far longer than 2 years. I mean, we've had trade agreements with not just the European Union, with many countries in the world. I mean, you can see the history of trade agreements. I'll give you just one instance to say that it's going to be, I don't know how long, but it will be many more years, more than 2. When the EEC was being expanded, when the European Common Market was being expanded to the EEC from 6 to 9, that's when I was in Brussels, one area of contention was one duty-free shop in one Nordic country, which was part of the European Free Trade Area, on a ferry, which plied between Britain and that Nordic port, which I forget, to sort out who was going to get the VAT taxes from that ferry which plied between those two ports. Took them 6 months.
Okay, we really run out of time, but one quick one-line answer from you. If things are going to be so messy, why has the pound strengthened after Theresa May's announcement?
Well, the world market doesn't necessarily reflect strength or weakness. It's a demand-supply thing. It's up today. It may just be down a few. Just wait till we hear what this Trump wants to do. Once you know what Trump to do, everything else may strengthen. So it's not reflected to the Brexit. You know, it's a real world portfolio selection, how people spread out their currencies.
Okay, we've really run out of time. I'd like to thank all of you, Professor Manoj Pant, Ambassador Shiv Shankar Mukherjee, Ambassador Dinkar Khullar, for participating in this discussion. That is all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week as usual. Until then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.